but we can get started here. I'm Holly Conrad Smith. I'm the Customer Success Manager at Giraffe, and I'm very excited to bring this webinar to you all. So thank you everyone for logging in and signing up. And today we're going to go through a lot of really exciting things. So we're going to start with a few product announcements, and then we'll dive into all the ways you can use data to inform your designs. During the presentation, if you have any questions, you can drop those questions in the Q&A box. And we'll get to those questions live as we're going. And you can also, we'll have a free question time at the end as well. So with that, I'm just going to hand us over to James Blackwood, who's presenting a few new product features. Take it away, James.
Thanks, Holly, and pleasure to be with everyone on the call. We've probably met in some digital way before, but thanks for everyone joining the call. I'm going to show two quick features. We've got three that we're going to highlight. The big exciting one is our speckle connector, which Holly is going to show us in a second. And I'm going to actually show two features that we have had in Giraffe for a long time, but they've been remastered. It's like the greatest hits redone. And these are features that particularly our consultant clients use a lot to highlight and draw out contextual features. And as Lucy is presenting around the Urban Planning Masterclass, she'll be using these features heavily. So those two features that I'm going to show are just the new markers. There's a couple of things, icons that look better, better fonts, much easier to use and deploy, and then arrows and regions. Again, nice, simple tools that anyone can use that have been overhauled and are much easier to deploy. And then the second thing I'm going to show very quickly is the new PDF report builder. And that's a super exciting feature which brings together a bunch of things that we've always had in Giraffe that makes them very easy to package up and send out to your clients. So you can see here I'm in like a brokerage style view of downtown San Francisco. And I've got my portfolio showing across all my projects. So let's just actually turn on some labels there so I can see what those projects are. And perhaps we want to draw attention to something like Salesforce Park. Maybe there is a actual park that we want to draw attention to up here. And so I'm going to just drop down to my annotations selector on my drawing toolbar, and I'm going to drop an icon in, and I can put in my nice little place marker there. As always, I can upload my own icon if I have other icons that I want to use, or logos. We have some brokers who love to drop in things like the surrounding retail or that kind of thing. But also I can just quickly and easily throw in some text. If I want to do that as well, I can flick that marker into a metro style looking stop. Beautiful, easy to do, and adds a lot of color to your map. So looking at markers, now let's pop into looking at arrows and regions. Like if we want to grab a quick region, again, these are things you could always do, but they were just kind of painful to do in the previous versions of Giraffe. So I can just pop in a really nice region there, and I can add a nice label here. We can say Park Highlight, whatever it might be. And as I do that, that nice new font comes up there very quickly. Arrows are the same. We now have a major arrow, minor arrow, and a dashed arrow. Major arrow is beautiful. Markers or arrowheads on either side, and you can customize how those are, and so on and so forth. I won't spend too long on arrows because arrows are really just arrows, but those can be customized to be whatever you'd like. When we just kick over to the report builder, as you may be familiar with in previous versions of Giraffe, we've got things like views where we can draw attention to specific parts of the story that we're trying to tell. And you'd also be very familiar with analytics where we can calculate custom metrics. So with Report Builder, we can now stitch those things together in a visual kind of interface on an A4 piece of paper and then print directly to PDF. So I've just started one here where you can see I've given it a name, Downtown San Francisco. Maybe we'll call this Portfolio View. I brought in an analytics module so I can see the actual math from that project. And if I had multiple scenarios, I could do it by multiple scenarios as well. I'm going to add in a new tab So I've got now a new space here, and I'm going to bring in a view that I saved earlier, and we'll just wait a second for it to go and get the views from my project. And once I've got one of them, I'll say, okay, actually, let's get the stack plan of that building. And again, I can add in another module, and maybe down the bottom here, I'll get this beautiful vista of the whole portfolio of downtown San Francisco. I can add my logo in the top right, and now that's ready for me to print a PDF. So this is a really awesome feature. It's just gone live, and it's available for anyone to use by clicking on the app icon here and going to My Workspace Apps and adding Builder. So please go in, check that out. It's awesome. I'm going to hand over to you, Holly, now to talk about Speckle. Holly, I think you're on mute there.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. It wouldn't let me unmute while I was trying to share my screen. So thanks for that, James. And here we go. So we're really excited about this new connection with Speckle because it really takes your Giraffe project interoperability to the next level. If you're not familiar with Speckle, it's a software that basically connects almost any architecture, engineering, or construction software that you can think of. What we're going to do today is take this Giraffe project that you see on your screen. I'm going to send it to Speckle, and then from Speckle, I'm going to open it up into Rhino. So to get started with that, the first thing I need to do is hop over to my Speckle window here and just grab a token. So the token just tells Speckle that you're giving Giraffe permission to send data. So I'm going to title this just webinar for today. You need to pick which information you want that token to allow. So I'm going to pick streams, read, and write, and just save that. And then it generates this token for you. So you want to copy all of that information. You'll see here that you need to save that token elsewhere outside of your account if you want to use it again. For the purpose today, I'm just going to copy it. And then I'll jump back into my Giraffe project and just open up our Speckle app here. And all I have to do now is paste this token in here, give my information a name, and then I can add in some additional information like describing what I'm sending, describing what version I'm sending. Today, I'm not going to include that information. And then I'll just click Post to Speckle. And I'll see that my data was successfully sent. And now when I jump over to my Speckle window and go to my feed, in just a moment, we'll see that new data has pulled into Speckle for me. So here's the information that I just pushed. I called it webinar. And if I open it up here in Speckle, I can even preview it in my web browser just to make sure that everything looks good to go. There it is. There's my project. It looks great. So I'm just going to open up my Rhino window here, and I already have the Speckle connector installed in Rhino. You could install this connector in Revit, in QGIS, in SketchUp. So you can take your Giraffe data almost anywhere now with this new connection. So I can see the data that I want to bring in. I named it webinar, so I'll just click on that. And I want to receive the data. So I'll just click receive. And in a couple of seconds, I will have that entire Giraffe project in Rhino. So you can imagine that this is going to be extremely powerful for taking your early feasibility projects to all of your other apps later down the road. And I'm really excited to see what everyone builds with this new connection. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Lucy. So, Lucy is an urban planner and a co founder of Giraffe, and she has a wealth of knowledge. So, I'm really excited to learn from her today how to leverage data and Giraffe for master planning. With that, take it away, Lucy.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. Thanks, James, too, for the intros. Um, thank you all for taking, now your day, morning, or evening. We've got people from across the world, which is really awesome, as always. So yeah, I'm Lucy. I'm an urban planner, one of the founders of Giraffe. If I haven't met you, thanks for coming. I have sort of designed the next half hour, 40 minutes to take you from, blank project start to finish of a master plan. It's not really about the design necessarily, but it's really about showing you the full spectrum of features that are available to you in Giraffe to use in a planning project. I'm looking at a precinct scale sort of project today, but obviously from a single site all the way through to a really large precinct or city. A lot of these tools can be used. So, and also so that you don't have to sit and watch me, draw for 40 minutes. I've already pre-cooked a lot of the content. So I will turn some stuff on and suddenly there will be a master plan. But as hopefully a lot of between Holly, Rob, and James, there is a wealth of content out there on the Giraffe website, on our YouTube channel, and LinkedIn for you to look at. If there's any feature that you see today that you really want to deep dive into, get in touch with Holly or myself and we can arrange a one-on-one. So I think that's probably it. What we're going to do is start with a blank map, identify our site that has been given to us by our client. We are then going to essentially do a site assessment, understand the constraints and conditions surrounding the site, pop a master plan onto it, adjust the master plan to respond to some of the site constraints that we find, do a little bit of work annotating, creating some of the views, and then I'm going to jump into the report builder and show you a bit more than what James previewed earlier. So you're going from identifying your site all the way through to presenting it back to your client or to your stakeholders. Okay. A really quick note, I'm tethering from my phone, so maybe Holly jump in and let me know if my screen seems to be lagging. So today we're going to be working in Sydney. That's where I'm located. I know the data well, so that's why we're going to start here. I picked a site that has a very few constraints, mostly on purpose. But we are going to use some of our data and analytics tools to try and understand the context of that site a little bit better. It's completely hypothetical. I've taken some army barracks that are located in Randwick or South Coogee, just south of the Sydney CBD. So we've got a site, because this is a masterclass, we are assuming that a lot of you know the basics. So I've already created a project. I've drawn a boundary around my site, which we can see here. It's 25 hectares, pretty large site. So 2.5. Anyway, we will get going. I've added some base data here. We've got MetroMap by Aerometrics, which is quarterly updated imagery. So it means I can see exactly what is happening on the site, within the last 2 to 3 months. Always very helpful to see as close to existing condition as you can. The assumption here is that the army no longer need the site and are divesting it. I have made an assumption that the eastern side of this site is just going to go to public recreation. So we're only going to focus on a small section of this larger site. But the first thing I think about when I do a master plan or approach some sort of precinct or site for a design is the context. So I've already had a little think about this and drawn up some content here. This site is placed, maybe I'll just quickly turn on the site boundary for us so we can see it there with that red outline. It's actually really nicely placed, between a lot of different amenity services and recreational facilities. So all of the little green markers indicate pretty large open space, whether it's active or passive. And we've got some beautiful beaches, Coogee and Maroubra, sort of smack in between. We have some schools nearby. So these yellow ones indicate high schools and primary schools. I'm just going to show you quickly how to make one of these markers from scratch. Sorry. I know James touched on this, but we will just really quickly dive into it. So I'm going to use the text icon here. I want to essentially replicate this one, and rather than copy and paste it, I'm going to start from scratch. This is Randwick Girls High School. So I'm going to drop the marker here. Over on the left-hand side now, we've got some more properties. So first of all, I do want this to be text, not an image, but if it was an image, we can really simply pick a marker that we have loaded before. So I've used this education icon, drops on the map really nicely. You can scale it and play with it. It is an image, so we can't edit it from here, but if assuming you load the, the PNG or the JPEG that you like, you can start with that. So we're going to go back to text. I want this to be a rectangle shape to replicate the others. The text is going to say Randwick Girls High School. I think the size of the other ones is 0.25. We're going to copy the color from here. So we add our color. Otherwise, very easy to use the color picker. The text color will be black. And here with the border option, so you can see it takes the same color as the text for the border. We don't want one though, so we're going to say no border. And the stick height is the height of that above ground, 100. So these are all very easy things to play with. If you have 0 stick height, you can play with, how the marker itself anchors around the points. There's also some other settings. You can add subtitles, which is the second line. World space will mean that they will scale appropriately or kind of inappropriately based on how you are zooming, back and forth between a local and a more regional or global scale. So there's lots of settings to play with. Would definitely encourage you to have a go at doing that. It's a really lovely way to very graphically tell a story about the context of your site or your project. James touched on some of the other things like area fill, some arrows. Again, we did touch on icon. These functions will really help you very strongly tell a story about your, your surroundings. We do have some detailed documentation coming that will be updated on markers, but it's hopefully very straightforward. Alistair, who joined our team a couple of months ago, has worked really hard on making this new and improved markers much better. So we've got a really nice story here. I've also got the light rail mapped in. We're sort of too far away from any of the major rail or metro transport to show them, and I don't actually have buses mapped here, but no problem. What I want to highlight though is proximity to transport. So what we could do is have some arrows or a buffer to show. What we'll do really quickly is drop a point here at the last light rail station that takes you into Sydney CBD. I'm going to make this a generic point and add some properties now. So I want to add a line color, a line width, a dash, a color for the fill, and the fill opacity. And we're just going to style this really quickly. So we'll make it red so it's sort of similar to the light rail. Oh, the last thing we want to add is an offset. There's some sort of, pretty general rules around how likely, what the distance people are likely to walk to different types of transport. It's usually a bit lower for light rails. So 400 meters is a more common walking distance. We'll do 800 because it's, still not within distance of the site. But we do want to show that there is some transport nearby to support some density here. the line width maybe 10 and the dash maybe a 2 or something like that. If you haven't explored properties in a graphic sense for any geometry that you draw, I would really encourage you to do that. You can make some really beautiful looking content on your map. And, you know, again, it will really help you tell a story about your site. So let's just say I'm really happy with this. It's telling the story that I want. The next thing that I'm going to do is create a view from this. Views are essential to the report builder function that we're going to get to later. So I'm just going to make these as I go so that we have them ready. So new view, and we'll call this local context. Save it. Now, for anyone who's not really familiar with views, again, there's plenty of documentation on this online, but what it does when you create a view is remembers the camera angle that you specified, as well as the combination of layers. So that should add and populate in a minute. Might come back and check that that's saved. As I mentioned, I'm tethering from my phone. One more time. Okay, I think they have saved and we'll come back later and check. So I'm going to turn my annotations off now. Always be very cautious about what your active layer is when you draw. These are on the default layer, but what I really want to do is put them on the annotations layer where the others were living. Okay, so that's the sort of initial piece of work. The step before that you may have done is bring in some layers. At this point, I've only used that base map of the aerometrics imagery. What we're going to do now, though, is look at some of the other layers. I think everyone, hopefully on this call, is a user that is familiar with Giraffe, so you'll know that we have a huge library of open source and open government data. We have a number of different ways that you can bring data in for yourself. I've gone ahead and pulled in some layers that are relevant for what I'm looking at. And many of these in this instance are coming from the New South Wales government, from Department of Customer Service, Spatial Services. So the first one I've turned on is our cadastre, or lot parcel boundary. That will tile up and load, so we can see immediately on our site that there is a couple of different parcels across the site. If I was a good planner, I would absolutely have made a boundary that aligned with property boundaries, but we're just going to pretend that's not an issue today. We've subdivided this new, these multiple lots or something like that. But regardless, property boundary data is very helpful. The next thing I'm going to look at is heritage overlays. So I'm going to turn that on. We'll just have to wait for a second for that to tile up. Okay, so we can see on the site that I've actually got 2 heritage buildings here. In the scheme that I quickly whipped up yesterday, I didn't consider any constraints. So what I'm going to do is actually replicate this information right now. And then we're going to sort of retrofit our master plan around it. So what I want to do is make a new drawing layer and call it heritage items. I think everyone hopefully knows that if you right click on nearly any feature on the map, regardless of whether it's a vector or a raster layer, the first thing you can do is actually view the data associated with it. So I right clicked, selected it. I didn't hit create yet. I've just selected it. And over on the left, we can see that query. So I can see that this is a locally listed, it's a general item in the Randwick LEP. It is the Randwick Barracks School of Musketry, Officers Mess, etc. It is just the building, I assume. And we'll just look at this one too. And this seems to be listed with the same, so associated. So we certainly want to respect both of them. So what I'm going to do now is again, right click, but this time hit create. Because our heritage item is our active layer, it's going to duplicate those geometries onto that layer. So now I have a nice copy of them. What we will do is assume that they are only 1 or 2 story buildings. So this probably doesn't give us a height if we were to turn on our 3D buildings from OpenStreetMap, or Mapbox, which I'll talk about shortly, we actually don't even have, any data that we can use. So I'm just going to make an assumption that these heritage items are 2 stories at worst, probably 1 at best. So we're going to use the context usage here. For anyone who doesn't know, what this does is gives you some built form that will cast a shadow but is not counted in your floor space. So it's always really helpful when you're sort of playing with contextual data sets or built form. I'm going to make them 1 because I don't feel like there'll be more than that for now. So we've got our heritage items. We're going to come back to them later, but they're certainly something that we need to consider on the site. So I'm going to go back to my LEP controls. So for anyone not from New South Wales or Sydney, the EPI is our environmental planning instrument. So these are essentially our controls for land zoning or any of the built form controls that the government sets. So our site is zoned SP1, which is an infrastructure zone. That's pretty typical of something like an army barracks, I assume. We're going to kind of ignore that anyway, so it's not that relevant. What I'm really interested in here is understanding what the adjacent sites or built form is looking like. So we're largely surrounded by R2 zoning, which is a low density residential. You can sort of see from the lot pattern, it's pretty detached, single dwelling. So 1 to 2 stories probably, but we will look at the height and FSR controls. R1 to the east of the site here is also a general residential zone. So it looks like it's potentially some new residential dwellings to be built there in the future. If we look at the aerial, we can see that it looks like there's some fairly new buildings in some of those R1 zones. So just cautious or, cognizant of those. So that's zoning. If we turn on our maximum height of building controls, they should tell us in a second when they load, probably a similar story. So maximum of 9.5 meters in nearly all directions, maybe 12. So we're looking at sort of anywhere between 2 and 4 stories for the surrounding area. So we just want to be conscious of that when we're transitioning to the built form of our master plan. And FSR or FAR, depending on where you are, there's a couple of different ways to describe it, but it's the ratio of built form to your site boundary. And again, it's pretty low, which is reflected in the height controls. So that's kind of a helpful way to understand some context for this essentially almost greenfield site. One last piece of analysis that I want to do, and I know a lot of you have probably seen some of Holly and Rob's content around the lens function, but I'm just going to show you another way to use it here in this context. And it's got 2 purposes. One is just to do a little bit more investigation of the surrounding built form. And the second is we're going to generate a figure ground with this through styling. So first of all, lens. Lens can be activated on any vector layer. So make sure that the layer has those little 4 anchor points, the little corners on that symbol. And if you have that available, you can use lens. So we're going to open it up. Now, a couple of things have happened. What it's done is remove all the existing, styling and filtering that we have. And we do that on purpose so that you have control. So if this kind of thing happens on a layer, it is intentional for now, and you can always restyle it or clear and it will go back to the way it was before. So what I want to do right now is just check my gut feeling on the built form. Now, these 3D buildings is an open source data set, so it is not super reliable if you want, really reliable data to sort of understand the built form, but it is really helpful in the sense that it gives you a fantastic idea of scale, density, all that sort of stuff. Just be cautious that it is an open source data set, but we really love it here at Giraffe. We're going to now add a filter. So the first thing I want to do is actually filter by height. And what I'm going to do here is I want to show buildings that are greater than, let's say, 4 meters or 3 meters, 5, 6. What I'm really trying to do is just understand the density around my site. And you can see that, you know, if this OpenStreetMap data is correct, or any other vector data set was correct, you can sort of see where there are pockets of different types of built form that are not these classic single-story dwellings. So these are likely to be residential flat buildings, anywhere between 2 to 6 stories high, with apartments in them. We can see some of the school buildings are higher, so is the hospital. You know, this is the Spot, which is a Randwick local shop. So you can see that there's obviously shop top housing. And so something like this filter is quite a nice way to kind of help you identify different types of urban form. We're going to clear that filter because that has served its purpose. The next thing I actually want to do is, and you could do this step after, but I'm going to do it before, is actually filter out the sites, the buildings on our site. So Mike from our team has done this really cool thing that only works on the 3D buildings layout. This geometry filter essentially allows you to include or exclude, but we're going to do exclude. We're going to draw a boundary around our site. And what it's going to do is kick any buildings that intersect with our site away. So some of the really older users in Giraffe probably remember the Context app. This sort of does that, but in reverse. So it's going to exclude sites and allows you then to keep all your other sites around, which is really awesome, or the other building. The next thing we're going to do is style it. So this is 3D at the moment. I want to give it a fixed color fill. I think I want them all to be white, but what I'm also going to do is give them an outline. And now any of you planners or architects watching will know that that basically represents now a really lovely figure ground. In 3D, having these outlines is actually maybe a little bit trippy and not that helpful, but certainly in this state, it's a really fantastic way to generate some content. And you could obviously make the fill black to make it even stronger. We're going to go back to our views now and create one more. So that other one did work, which is really awesome. I'll let them load for a second just so it's not too overwhelmed. Yeah, we'll just go for it. Okay. Okay, and then we're going to save that. I'm in top view so that North is up the page. We do have a scale included in all the views and images that come. We are going to talk a little bit about legends later on and how they can be used. But there we go. We've got another really nice diagram to add to our report later on. You can imagine that you may want to draw some arrows and other kinds of annotations on this figure ground. We sort of touched on that earlier between myself and James, so you could certainly have added them there, turned on the annotations that you were appropriate and saved them in the view. Okay, I'm just going to now remove the outline on my site, on my buildings, so that we don't get too distracted with all the line work. And now we will just look at one more set of data layers. You know, planning controls are always not the only consideration. As I said, I've picked a fairly unproblematic site here, and we can see that in a few different ways. Let's turn off the buildings for a second. One of the things I have on here is some elevation contours. So these sort of the grey squiggles, you can see the contours are coming from, again, the New South Wales government data set. The further you zoom in, the better detail you'll get on the numbers that indicate the elevation height. So we can sort of see that it's a little bit higher on the northern side and it slopes down fairly gently for the most part on down to the southern side of the site. If we just look a little bit more widely, again, it sort of comes up to a height over here to the west, and over on the eastern side, we come up again to a much higher sort of view up at the top of this little residential area. So this existing park to the east definitely has a slope that comes up quite dramatically from that body of water. But this park area, again, is fairly flat, but does go slope from north to south. So always helpful to consider that when you're designing. I've brought in another layer here called public spaces. This is from, again, New South Wales government, and it just indicates different types of identified open spaces in the area. Again, we can right click on any of them, identify what it is. This one says it's undeveloped or unspecified, but it is public land, presumably. So again, you can just click on different layers and understand what they are and just consider them in your context. Ones that I will note here are these little reserves to the south. Looks like maybe at one time there were roads connecting through or intended, but we're just going to be conscious of these. And you can see from the area that they are used for parking or presumably open spaces for other users. So that's really helpful. If you had a site that was, flood, bushfire affected, I'm hoping you'd spend the time bringing in the appropriate layers, noting those things down. In the same way that we have replicated the heritage items on the site, perhaps you carve out a flood zone or a bushfire zone and sort of, visually indicate what that constraint might be so that you can understand what your design response to that is. Okay, so now is the sort of magic bit. We've understood our site, we know what's going on. I'm going to show you a pre-cooked master plan on this site. And we're just going to really quickly refresh so my trees pop up again. If you ever have issues with something displaying, a good refresh usually does the trick. We'll turn that off and we'll turn our built form and landscape back on. We should see some nice trees pop up everywhere. Okay, even though we are in a recording, I am actually just going to really quickly clear my cache because that always helps. One more time, sorry everyone. But hopefully this helps you troubleshoot in your own time. I can see there's been some questions and content in the chat. Holly, while I'm reloading, anything to talk through?
There are some good questions around 3D building data, and maybe if we have some time at the end, we can show some of the scene server work that we've done with some clients. I can show San Francisco if that's helpful.
Yeah,
and
awesome. We can talk through that.
Yeah, and there's a couple on geolocation. A lot of interest in speckle, and I think we've answered most of those.
Okay, cool. Well, considering that we are back with 3D trees working, maybe we can come back to some of those things afterwards.
That's great.
Cool. Thanks, James. Okay, so this is a master plan that I came up with last night. Let's absolutely not think too hard about the design. It was pretty quick exercise. It was really just to show you some built form that we can manage and play around. And also get some output from in terms of, yield and analysis that we can undertake. So first thing that I want to do is just quickly sort of talk you through what I've done. I have largely used a lot of our flow builder, typologies or, presets here. I know that there have been a lot of deep dives on those things. So if you want more information on any of them, Holly, myself, Rob, James can absolutely spend time with anyone who wants to dive into them. I've used the apartment builder to drop in all of the apartments that you can see. If they don't have a core, it's not intentional. Again, I just drew these pretty quickly. We then have some sort of sports oval here, some other more passive open spaces with some nice trees. lots of landscape and trees in between all our buildings. Those ones are using the parks with trees function, and hopefully all of you should know that any of these can be changed at any time. If I did not like the mix of trees here and I wanted to have less of them, I can specify the number of trees and also play with the arrangement of them on the site so we can move them around. So there's lots of really fun things you can do, including with roads where we have assigned, how far apart the trees are. So yeah, lots of really interesting stuff you can do to generate your built form. I then have a little retail community building here. Again, it's just sort of, some local jobs, some local amenity, and then a childcare, a library, whatever's appropriate. So we got a scheme. Now, something that we discovered when we were doing our initial analysis is that there are some heritage items over here. So one of them goes right in, we have a road right through it, which is totally not ideal. And then this looks like a really beautiful old building over here. So I'm just going to spend 2 minutes moving some stuff around so that we can accommodate for these heritage items. So I've got them on a layer here. I am going to lock that so that we don't accidentally move them around. I'm going to have built form, landscape, and roads are the 3 that I'm sort of focusing on here. So first thing I'll do is really quickly move the road, maybe like that. I might get rid of this for now, and this one. And just rejig, the way that some of these buildings are addressing the street. It may be really inappropriate to have a residential building there. Instead, I'm going to get rid of, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to, considering that we have a lot of sports fields around, I'm going to get rid of this big park and move this content over here. And what we'll do is reallocate the park to this space here. So maybe we have a really lovely sort of heritage precinct here where the building becomes some sort of community or recreational use. Again, we can sort of recut the trees any way we like later. Let's get something nice happening at the street level down here. So we continue this street wall. We'll make sure that it's only 3 stories to be sympathetic to its neighbours. We might also drop down the density here to look onto the park. Actually, 5 stories, 4 might be appropriate. We'll draw some apartments. And go all the way. Again, we want to make sure we're drawing onto the right layer. So let's just make sure that the built form layer is our active one. One more, I guess. These may not be that suitable in a line this way, but just for the sake of moving on, we will draw something like this. And so you see, within a few minutes, in fact, we should probably have something on the street wall to address these buildings, but that's cool. We'll drop in a park with trees between some of these. We want these on the landscape layer, and we're just going to play with the number of trees here. So you can see on the fly, it's really very easy to generate a lot of this form, make quick decisions on the fly. And then one more. We can then manage the layers that they live on and so on. So very quickly, we have changed our master plan, obviously with not a lot of thought, but you can take the extra sort of 20 to 30 minutes to really consider how you're addressing the street and your network. And now we have considered these 2 heritage buildings. I think we might look to remove or, change the, definitely not 8 meters to interface with that. We'll go something like 2, maybe they're more walk-up style apartments, and we would obviously have a respectful amount of circulation around that building so that we're not overshadowing or anything like that. Now, in the interest of time, I won't run the solar analysis. I think this is a lot of single geometries for the solar to do while I'm tethering from my phone, but I think hopefully all of you know that that is a really useful tool to help you understand the impact of your built form. We can control shadows, time of day and time of year, which is really nice. So we'll go with winter solstice just to see what the worst case shadows are. Trees do cast shadows. So if you're running solar analysis or trying to understand performance of public spaces, trees from flow will sort of, contribute to that shadow and not maybe give you the best understanding of how a building interacts with that space. So just be mindful of that as you're working. So we've got a master plan that responds to some site constraints, provides the amenity and all the good things that we want. We've used some of the flow geometries and added some jobs and community facilities and amenities. I think most of you are really familiar with the urban tab because it's the default view. We are going to go into analytics. Now, I've already imported the template, the general Giraffe template here. Now, what I want to do is just quickly change a few things. I'm only going to spend 2 minutes on this because we've only got a little bit of time left, and I still want to show you the report builder. Before we actually do that, I'm just going to really quickly create one more view here and call it scheme or option 1. Obviously, if you had multiple options for your site, you could create a view for each of them. Awesome. So we'll come back now to analytics. And because we're in Sydney, because there is a housing crisis, I'm going to make some assumptions around this whole precinct having some social and then some affordable housing as part of this total stock. Now, without necessarily designating exactly which buildings accommodated for it, which could be done at this stage, maybe done at later stages, what we're going to do is just add some really basic assumptions here. So we'll go to category, no, we'll go to categories. No, we're going to go here and add a new measure. Sorry. So we're going to call this one social housing. Our units are dwellings. It's a property. So we're going to take the total dwelling count from this entire project. This equals say times, we'll say 10% for that. We'll save that. And that should drop in here. So we can see 361 of the total dwellings will be social. We're just going to do that 2 more times really quickly. We'll say affordable, dwellings, total, let's say 20%, one usually generous allocation. And then what we'll do is, also pick a market housing number, just so that we understand the leftover. Again, dwellings, total properties. There between Holly, Rob and James, they've done some really great deep dives into analytics, how you can create some really interesting calculations here. And what have we got left? 70%. So this is just obviously very simple. What I'm going to do now, though, is add a really nice graph that shows us the breakdown between the 3 of them. So we'll go to categories. We are in demographic and economic impact. We're going to add a display. We don't necessarily need a title. We could add one if we wanted. We'll go with a pie chart. We're only going to include social, affordable, and market. I want it to be a pie chart with measures. We are, though, also going to keep the table so that we can see it. So when I save that, you'll notice that it now shows me the breakdown between those three types of products, I suppose, in the project, and still includes them here. We can drop them out of the table if you don't want to repeat, but just a really nice little way to widgetize. So would definitely encourage anyone to play around with the new categories display. Jeremy from our team has done a really great job coming up with these. I think we hope to add to them over the future, but certainly play around with them. You can make some really beautiful reports here. Okay, so we've done that. I feel really happy with the yield. Let's assume that you're hitting all your right targets. There is the precinct app, which hopefully you're all across, which can break down that total FSR into sort of sub precincts or by site. Obviously, you need to configure your layers to do that appropriately. Again, there's a whole 101. I'm pretty sure that Holly's done on that. So we can provide that content if needed. What we're going to do now, though, is go to the builder. So James was a little bit incorrect earlier when he said that it was available for you. It's not yet, but it will be very soon. I think sort of in the next 2 to 4 weeks. Jeremy's still working furiously on it, making improvements. So what I'm going to show you right now is kind of only 40–50% of the capability. I am going to show you one slightly more advanced one on our dev environment in a minute. But what we do is activate the app. So hopefully in public apps, you will see Builder available called Builder. And what we're going to do is create a new one. So you can edit the title, Derek's redevelopment. You can edit your logo here. So we can choose another one. I'm pretty certain I have a New South Wales government logo here, but again, use whatever you like. It will automatically populate with your workspace's logo, but is very changeable. So if you're making something for your client, you may want to upload their logo. We can change the background color, make it heinous like that. Let's do something a bit less stressful. That's not ideal. And so on. So you can play with this as you like. If this is a title page, you may only want to add some text and it may, and it's just quit, but that's cool. What I might do is actually jump into the more advanced one and you'll see something that's already set up. That's going to give us a much better idea of what's going on. This is in our dev environment. So again, you won't have access to this. I'm going to open up this one here. I'm going to turn off guidelines. So you'll see here, I can get rid of that title. I can change the logo here. Let's just use this little agreement handshake that I have previously. Oh, anyway, I can't, Jez, a nice bug to notice that when this one's smaller, I couldn't use that one because it was too large on the preview. So we've got a nice logo there. I've used this as a text page, so we can edit this. I can change the size of these fonts, edit it, put a date, whatever we like, and you save that. So what I'm going to do as I scroll down is show you a few different types of layouts that we can do. This one is really simple, just 2 text slots is what we call them, with a header. This page has a much larger text slot and you can also load images as well. So that's really straightforward to do. Here is where it starts to get really interesting. And if you were to create a template for your organization, imagine how easy it would be to set up your standard report type. And then essentially what we're doing here, I'm just going to remove this one to show you how it works, is we can bring in a view that has been set up. So as I worked on that previous master plan, we set up a few different views showing, different types of analysis or optionality for the design. And all we're really doing here is looking at those saved views and importing the appropriate one. We can get rid of the description. We can choose how the image fits or contains in this designated slot. If I don't like this heading, I should be able to force no heading and then it will fill that spot. Again, this is just some placeholder text, but you can drop in text that is appropriate for the page. We've got page numbers and a date, all that sort of good stuff. Here I've put in some blank text again, but I've imported a whole bunch of views to generate these images. We can then start putting in design options. Now, something that is really exciting is the ability to bring in analytics. So you can, hopefully you remember me a few seconds ago creating the breakdown between the different types of social, market and affordable housing. That little graph could be dropped in here. So let's remove this. This time we're going to bring in some analytics. We have to pick the category that we used previously. So that one was something in economics. In this project, yields has been populated. We have a pie chart that I didn't give a name to, and we're going to insert it. So there's still a tiny bit of CSS to fix here. The spacing of these is not quite right, but those will be fixed in the next few days. And again, you can just start to create new pages and generate content. So there are some really easy, pre-built ones here. We really simply give the page a title. We can bring in some text. Let me just steal. We're going to edit this text and just copy it, close that, come back here, go text. We're going to edit this, drop our text in a few times, and then we've got a page. It will give you some warnings if you overrun slots. So you shouldn't be able to scroll within one. Obviously, we need to export these for you as a PDF as they are on the page. And then in these slots here, again, we can just bring in different views or images as needed. And you basically start curating your content. So it's a really quite friendly way to use it. You can change the page order. You can change the background, the headings. You can add different kinds of sort of dynamic slots, as we call them. So here on this page, if I add a second one down the bottom, which we saw James do earlier, again, I can just grab different types of things. So we're going to choose an image from here. These are, again, some sort of silly things that I had loaded for a previous project, but it's really a matter of finding them, changing your fill or otherwise settings, and you have a report. So the last sort of piece of the puzzle that Jeremy's working on right now is templatizing these. So you and all your team can have a standard, insert name of company template, and then open that up in a project. And it's really a matter of inserting the correct views or images and editing your text as needed, and then really simply printing it to PDF. So that was a real quick whip through on how I think about all the different elements of Giraffe coming together to help me curate a project. Plenty of functionality that helps with the design and the storytelling. And then hopefully this final piece of the puzzle helps you get content out of Giraffe and explain it to your client or to your team. I know we're right on time, but happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to follow up individually with people if there's something that I haven't answered. Holly or James, something to add or any particular questions we should talk about?
I think we've answered all of the questions in the Q&A box. So do you want to open up for live questions, or would you I know we're right at time, so I don't want to keep anyone too late if that's if that doesn't work.
Yeah, we're recording this, so we'll send out the thing, and you can follow up the questions afterwards. But happy to take 2 or 3.
Yeah. So Oscar is asking for some examples from James' already built form. James, are you able to take that one?
Yep, let me have a quick look. Oscar, are you referring? I think you're referring to the 3D scene servers we mentioned at the start. So I'll just zip over to San Francisco and share my screen.
Sure.
Hang on a second here. Okay. So I'm just going to load these in, and this is a scene server. We actually support a few different types, and there'll be more coming. But what's in the product today is the Esri scene server connection. So if you have a 3D data set that you've got loaded into a Esri scene server, you can just connect directly to that and start to visualize it in the context of your portfolio. So you probably remember I had all my projects in there, and just like I could draw before, I can still draw and create a commercial tower that's 40 stories tall in the context there of a beautiful 3D rendering. So Oscar, I hope that's what you're asking, but I'll show you how I added that. So I hit add data layer, create your own, and you'll see we've got these Esri map server, feature server, and little secret. If you click on that and put in a scene server, then it will actually work, and you'll be able to load that up as well.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think we've hit all of the answers in the Q&A. If we happen to miss anything, please feel free to send us an email or use that live chat function inside of Giraffe. I'm going to drop a link to our next webinar that's coming up in about a month, where we're going to take a really deep look at building a real estate analytics and pro forma inside of Giraffe. So make sure to register for that one. And thank you so much, Lucy, for your presentation. Thanks, James, for the product announcements. And we'll see you all next time.